The stars above New Havana burned with unnatural light. Commander Hyan Wu watched from the bridge of his destroyer as reality itself seemed to tear open. One moment, the colony world's orbit was peaceful. The next, the sky filled with ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The Vorath Empire had arrived. Hyan Wu had 20 minutes of warning before the first weapon fired. His crew scrambled to battle stations, but everyone knew the truth. The defense fleet protecting New Havana consisted of 12 ships. The Vorath brought over 200. "All stations report ready," his first officer said. Her voice was steady, but Hyan Wu saw her hands shaking. "Send the distress signal to Earth," Hyan Wu ordered. "Make sure they know what's coming." The Vorath ships moved with mechanical precision. They formed attack patterns that human tacticians had never seen before. These were not explorers or traders. This was an invasion force that knew exactly what it was doing. When the communication came, it was brief. The Vorath demanded immediate surrender. They gave humanity 30 minutes to abandon all military positions and prepare for occupation. They promised mercy to those who complied. They promised nothing to those who resisted. Hyan Wu looked at the faces of his crew. Young men and women from Earth, Mars, the Jupiter colonies. They had signed up to protect human space from pirates and smugglers, not to fight an interstellar empire. But here they were. "What are your orders, Commander?" His weapons officer asked. Hyan Wu thought about his wife on Earth, his daughter who had just started university. He thought about the 3 million colonists on New Havana below, people who had traveled across the stars to build new lives. He thought about all the humans scattered across a dozen worlds, unaware that their entire civilization was about to be tested. "Charge weapons," he said. "We fight." The battle lasted 6 hours. The human ships used every trick they had learned from centuries of naval warfare. They scattered, regrouped, focused fire on individual targets. Hyan Wu's destroyer managed to cripple one Vorath cruiser before its shields failed, but it was not enough. One by one, the human ships died. The Vorath weapons were simply too powerful, their armor too thick, their numbers too great. Still, the humans kept fighting. Ships that should have retreated instead pushed forward. Captains with disabled weapons rammed their vessels into Vorath hulls. Crews that could have escaped in life pods instead stayed at their posts. The Vorath had expected an easy victory. They got one, but not the way they imagined. Every human ship had to be destroyed completely. None surrendered. None fled. Hyan Wu's ship was one of the last 3 remaining. His bridge was on fire, half his crew was dead, and the life support was failing. But the weapons still worked. "Commander, we should evacuate," his first officer coughed through the smoke. "No," Hyan Wu said. "Get me a channel to the Vorath flagship." When the alien commander appeared on the screen, Hyan Wu saw his first Vorath face. It looked almost reptilian, with scales instead of skin and eyes that seemed to see in colors humans could not perceive. "You wish to surrender?" the Vorath commander asked in perfect English. "No," Hyan Wu said. "I want you to remember this moment. When you report to your empire, I want you to tell them exactly what happened here. We were 12 ships against 200. We knew we would lose. And we fought anyway." The Vorath commander tilted his head, confused. "Why?" Hyan Wu smiled. "Because we're human. Tell them we were here." He cut the transmission and ordered his ship on a collision course with the nearest Vorath carrier. The destroyer accelerated to ramming speed. Hyan Wu held his daughter's picture as the Vorath weapons tore his ship apart. The explosion took 3 Vorath vessels with it. The battle for New Havana was over. The Vorath had won, but it had cost them 17 ships and thousands of their warriors. For a species that usually conquered with barely any losses, it was shocking. On the surface of New Havana, the Vorath ground forces landed expecting resistance. They found cities already evacuated. The colonists had fled to the mountains, taking everything they could carry. The Vorath controlled empty buildings and abandoned streets. When they sent patrols into the wilderness, humans ambushed them. The colonists fought with mining equipment and hunting rifles, weapons that should have been useless against Vorath armor. But the humans knew the terrain, and they fought with a fury that surprised their invaders. Back on Earth, the news of New Havana's fall sent shockwaves through the United Terran Council. The council chamber filled with representatives from every human world. Some called for immediate counterattack. Others wanted to negotiate. Everyone understood that humanity faced extinction if they chose wrong. That was when they called for Jiwan. She was working on a mining dispute between two asteroid colonies when the summons came. A transport ship picked her up and rushed her to Earth at maximum speed. She had no idea why a diplomat known for settling labor disputes was needed for a military crisis. The council president met her personally. He was an old man who had seen humanity's first steps into space. Now he might see its last. "We need someone to go to the Vorath homeworld," he said without preamble. "We need to negotiate a ceasefire before they destroy us all." "Why me?" Jiwan asked. "Because you understand something most diplomats don't," the president said. "You understand that sometimes the best negotiations happen when both sides are afraid of what comes next." Jiwan thought about that. What if they won't negotiate? Then you come home and we prepare for war. A real war. The kind that ends civilizations. Jiwan accepted the mission. She was given a small crew and an unarmed ship called the Meridian. They would fly under a flag of truce directly into the heart of the Vorath Empire. If the Vorath decided to ignore diplomatic immunity, they would simply disappear as their ship prepared to leave Earth orbit. Jiwan received a message from the military high command. It was coded, meant only for her eyes. Inside was a file labeled Protocol Ember. She opened it and went pale. Protocol Ember was humanity's contingency plan if diplomacy failed. It detailed how every human world would convert to total war production, how civilian populations would be armed and trained, how human ships would adopt guerrilla tactics across the entire galaxy, how Earth itself would become a fortress that would take decades to crack. But the most disturbing part was the final section. If humanity faced complete defeat, Protocol Ember authorized the development and deployment of weapons so terrible that they had been banned by every human government for a century. Biological weapons, relativistic kill vehicles, weapons designed not to win wars, but to ensure that everyone lost. Jiwan closed the file and looked out at Earth spinning below. Somewhere down there, her parents lived in Sol. Her brother worked as a teacher on Mars. Millions of humans lived their lives, unaware that their entire species stood on the edge of annihilation. The Meridian's engines fired, and Jiwan began her journey into the unknown. Behind her, Earth prepared for the worst. Factories began retooling. Military academies filled with volunteers. Scientists began dusting off weapons research that had been mothballed decades ago. The Vorath Empire had ignited a war. They thought they understood what that meant. They had conquered 17 species before humanity. Each had followed predictable patterns. Each had surrendered when the cost became too high. But the Vorath had never fought humans before. They did not understand what they had awakened. They did not know that humanity's entire history was a story of survival against impossible odds. They did not know that humans had spent millennia fighting each other, learning every brutal lesson that war could teach. Admiral Fexus, commander of the Vorath invasion fleet, sat in his quarters on the flagship and reviewed the battle reports from New Havana. Something bothered him. The humans had fought past all logic, past all reason. Their ships had been destroyed to the last bolt. But they had made the Vorath pay for every meter of space dot in the intelligence section of the flagship. Officer Krell was compiling data. He noticed patterns in the human combat doctrine that made him uneasy. The humans fought like a species that expected to be outnumbered and outgunned. Their tactics seemed designed for long wars of attrition. Their ship designs prioritized durability over firepower. Krell filed a report suggesting further study of human psychology before proceeding with the full invasion. The report was tagged as low priority and buried under celebrations of victory far away. Ji-Wan's ship jumped faster than light travel, heading toward the Vorath homeworld. She carried humanity's hopes with her, along with something the Vorath had not expected. She carried the truth. The Vorath homeworld appeared on the view screen like a massive jewel. Vorathis Prime was 3 times the size of Earth, with purple oceans and continents that glowed with city lights visible even from orbit. The planet was the center of an empire that stretched across 12 star systems and controlled the fates of billions. Ji-Wan stood on the bridge of the Meridian, watching as Vorath patrol ships surrounded them. Her small crew stood beside her. Dae-Yun, the communications specialist, was busy making sure their translation systems worked perfectly. One wrong word could end the mission before it started. Minho, the security officer, checked the ship's systems even though they had no weapons. Yunji, the xenanthropologist, studied every detail of the Vorath ships through the sensors. "They're scanning us," Dae-Yun reported. "Very thorough scans." "Let them," Ji-Wan said. "We have nothing to hide." That was not exactly true. Hidden in the Meridian's computers were extensive files on human history and culture. But the Vorath would not understand their significance until Ji-Wan was ready to show them. A message came through. The Vorath were granting them permission to land, but only after their ship was completely inspected. Vorath soldiers would board and search everything. Ji-Wan agreed immediately. Cooperation was essential. The boarding party consisted of 6 Vorath warriors in full armor. They moved through the Meridian like predators, checking every corner. Ji-Wan and her crew stood calmly, showing no fear. The Vorath seemed almost disappointed by this. "You are not afraid?" One of the warriors asked Ji-Wan directly. "Should I be?" She replied. The warrior stared at her with those strange alien eyes. "Your world is at war with the Empire. We could kill you now, and nothing would stop us." Ji-Wan met his gaze without blinking. "Yes, you could. But then you would never know what I came here to tell you." The warrior made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Humans are interesting. Weak, but interesting." After the inspection, the Meridian was allowed to land at the capital city's diplomatic court. The city was enormous, far larger than anything on Earth. Buildings rose kilometers into the sky, connected by bridges and transport tubes. Vorath citizens moved through the streets in organized patterns that seemed almost choreographed. Ji-Wan and her team were taken to a holding facility while the Imperial Senate decided whether to receive them. They waited for 3 days. The rooms were comfortable, but clearly designed to intimidate. The ceilings were too high. The gravity was stronger than Earth normal. The temperature slightly too cold for human comfort. "They're testing us," Yunji observed, "seeing if we'll complain or show weakness." "Then we won't," Ji-Wan said simply. On the 3rd day, they were summoned to the Imperial Senate. The building was a massive dome made of crystalline material that refracted light in ways that hurt human eyes. Inside, hundreds of Vorath officials sat in tiered rows surrounding a central platform. At the highest point sat Empress Velara herself. The Empress was larger than the other Vorath, with scales that shimmered like metal. She wore no crown or jewelry. Her authority came from her presence alone. When she spoke, everyone listened. The human delegation may approach. Her voice echoed through the chamber. Ji-Wan walked to the center platform, her team following. She felt hundreds of alien eyes watching her every move. Any sign of weakness here would doom not just her mission, but possibly her entire species. "You have requested an audience with the Imperial Senate," Empress Melara said. "Speak." Ji-Wan took a deep breath. "Your Majesty, honored members of the Senate, I come as a representative of the United Terran Council to propose an immediate ceasefire between our peoples." The chamber erupted in sounds that the translation systems interpreted as laughter. The Vorath found her proposal amusing. "You wish to negotiate from a position of defeat." Admiral Fexus spoke from his seat. "Your forces were destroyed at New Havana. Your military is no match for the Empire. What do you have to offer except surrender?" "I offer understanding," Ji-Wan said calmly. "I offer the chance to avoid a war that will cost both our peoples more than you could imagine." More laughter. Empress Velara raised a hand, and the chamber fell silent. "You speak of costs," the Empress said. "What costs could a primitive species inflict upon an empire that has conquered 17 worlds?" This was the moment. Ji-Wan knew her next words would determine everything. "Before we discuss terms, I request access to your Imperial archives," she said. "Specifically, I wish to review the historical records of your previous conquests." The request surprised the Senate. Murmurs spread through the chamber. "Why would you wish to study our victories?" Admiral Fexus asked suspiciously. "Because I believe there is something in those records that you have not seen," Ji-Wan replied. "Something that will make you reconsider this war." Empress Velara leaned forward, intrigued. "You claim to understand our own history better than we do?" "No, Your Majesty. I claim to understand my own species better than you do. And I believe your archives will prove my point." The Empress considered this. It was an unusual request, but she was curious. What could a human diplomat possibly find in Vorath records that would matter? Besides, letting them study the Empire's glorious conquests might actually demoralize them further. "Very well," the Empress decided. "You will be granted limited access to the Imperial archives. You have 2 days." Ji-Wan bowed. "Thank you, Your Majesty." That night, in the archives building, Ji-Wan's team worked frantically. The Vorath records were extensive and detailed. Every conquest was documented with military precision. Battle reports, casualty figures, timeline of surrender, post-occupation statistics.UNG was in her element. As a xenanthropologist, she had spent years studying alien cultures. Now she analyzed the Vorath's conquered species with a critical eye. "Look at this pattern," she said, displaying data on a holographic screen. Every species the Vorath defeated followed the same psychological progression. Initial resistance, escalating casualties, breaking point, surrender. What was the breaking point? Ji-Wan asked. On average, species surrendered when military casualties reached 23%, Yunji said. Some held out longer, up to 30%. But all of them eventually calculated that continued resistance was suicidal and surrendered to preserve their populations. Dayan pulled up human historical data on another screen. Now look at Earth's wars. The numbers were staggering. The First World War, where some nations lost 40% of their young men and kept fighting. The Second World War, where entire cities were destroyed and populations fought on. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, countless conflicts where humans fought past all logical breaking points. "We're different," Minho said quietly. "Every species the Vorath conquered knew when to quit. We never learned that lesson." Ji-Wan studied the data late into the night. She cross-referenced Vorath military doctrine with human combat psychology. She compared the Empire's strategic assumptions with Earth's actual history. The picture that emerged was terrifying. The Vorath expected to fight a rational enemy, an enemy that would surrender when defeat was certain, an enemy that valued survival over pride, But humanity was not rational about war. Humans fought lost causes. Humans died for symbols and ideas. Humans had literally invented the concept of mutually assured destruction and lived with it for generations. On the second day, Ji-wan made another discovery. Yoonji found it buried in old Vorath strategic assessments. Every conquered species shared certain traits, Yoonji explained. Hierarchical societies based on strength. Expansion through dominance. Limited capacity for sustained sacrifice. The Vorath developed their entire military doctrine around fighting species like themselves. And humans? Ji-wan asked. We're the opposite. We create democracies and then draft armies. We preach peace and then develop terrible weapons. We fight each other for centuries and then unite against external threats. We're an evolutionary paradox. Ji-wan requested a second audience with the Imperial Senate. This time, the Empress granted it immediately. The human delegation had piqued her curiosity. When Ji-wan stood before the Senate again, she carried a data pad filled with information that would change everything. Your Majesty, honored Senate members, she began. I have studied your records of conquest. They are impressive. You have built an empire through military excellence and strategic brilliance. We do not need humans to tell us this, Admiral Thexus said. No, Ji-wan agreed. But you do need humans to tell you this. Every species you have conquered was predictable. You understood their psychology. You knew their breaking points. You fought enemies that followed the same rules you do. She activated her datapad, projecting images above the Senate floor. Humanity does not follow those rules. We have spent our entire history fighting ourselves. We have waged wars that lasted decades, even centuries. We have destroyed our own cities rather than surrender them. We have developed weapons capable of extinguishing all life on our homeworld, and we built them by the thousands. The Senate chamber grew quiet. The images showed human conflicts in brutal detail. Cities reduced to rubble. Populations displaced. Technologies designed purely for killing. You see weakness in our defeat at New Havana, Ji-wan continued. We see data. You destroyed 12 ships with 200. You suffered 17 ships lost. That's an 8% casualty rate for a battle you won completely. She paused to let that sink in. In human military history, 8% losses is considered acceptable. Light even. We have fought battles where we expected 50% casualties and still attacked. We have held positions where 90% of defenders died rather than retreat. Admiral Thexus stood. You attempt to frighten us with numbers. But numbers do not change reality. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Ji-wan nodded. Yes, absolutely correct. We will lose a war against the Vorath Empire. But the question is not whether you can defeat us. The question is whether you can afford to. Empress Valara leaned forward. Explain. Your Majesty, your empire fights wars of conquest. You win quickly, occupy efficiently, and integrate the conquered. But humanity has spent thousands of years learning how to fight wars of attrition. Wars where everyone loses. Wars where victory and defeat become meaningless compared to the cost. Ji-wan pulled up more data. If you invade Earth, we will fight from every planet, every station, every asteroid. We will convert our entire civilization to war production. We will attack your supply lines, ambush your patrols, and make every meter of space cost you blood. It might take you 10 years to conquer us, maybe 20. But when you're done, you will have spent resources conquering one species that you could have used to conquer 10 others. The chamber was completely silent now. We don't expect to win, Ji-wan said softly. We just expect to make you wish you had never started. The Imperial Senate chamber remained silent after Ji-wan's words. Empress Valara studied the human diplomat with renewed interest. This was not the desperate plea for mercy she had expected. This was something else entirely. "You speak of costs and casualties," the Empress said. "But all wars have costs. What makes you think the Empire cannot bear them?" Jiwan took a breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for since leaving Earth. "Your Majesty, may I ask a question? Has anyone in this chamber actually studied human history in detail?" The question seemed to offend some of the Senate members. Admiral Thexus made a dismissive gesture. "We study military capabilities, not primitive cultures," he said. "That," Jiwan replied, "is your first mistake." She activated her datapad again. New images filled the space above the Senate floor. But these were not battle scenes. These were historical records, documents, photographs from Earth's past. "This is Earth, approximately 300 years ago," Jiwan narrated. "We had not yet reached space. We had not yet unified under a single government. What we had was war." The images showed the world wars, trenches filled with soldiers, cities burning from aerial bombardment, mushroom clouds rising over destroyed populations. "In this conflict alone, over 70 million humans died," Jiwan said. "That represents about 3% of our total population at the time. The war lasted 6 years. When it ended, the losing nations were completely destroyed. Their cities were rubble. Their industries were shattered." She changed the images. 10 years later, those same nations had rebuilt. 20 years later, they were economic powers again. Humans do not stay defeated. The Vorath senators shifted uncomfortably. This history was unlike anything they had encountered. But the truly important part, Jiwan continued, came after. You see, humanity developed weapons during these wars. Nuclear weapons. Single bombs capable of destroying entire cities. We built thousands of them. Admiral Thexus interrupted. "Many species develop such weapons. They are crude but effective." "Yes," Jiwan agreed. "But most species use them to conquer. We use them to prevent war." She displayed new data. For nearly a century, the major powers on Earth pointed these weapons at each other. We called it mutually assured destruction. If one side attacked, both sides would be annihilated. Billions would die. Our homeworld would become uninhabitable. "Madness," someone in the Senate muttered. "Perhaps," Jiwan said. "But it worked." We lived under the threat of total annihilation for generations. Children grew up knowing that war could end their entire civilization in an afternoon. And we adapted. We learned to exist with that fear. Empress Valara was listening intently now. "What is your point?" "My point, Your Majesty, is that humanity has already faced extinction. Multiple times. We have already lived through scenarios where our entire species could be destroyed. And instead of breaking us, it made us stronger." Jiwan pulled up more historical data. "Let me show you something else. This is a projection based on your own military records. When you fight a species, you calculate their breaking point. The moment when continued resistance becomes psychologically impossible." Yunji had prepared detailed charts comparing Vorath conquests. Every species showed the same pattern. Initial resistance, escalating losses, psychological collapse, surrender. "Now look at human conflicts," Jiwan said. The human data was chaotic, unpredictable. Some wars ended quickly. Others dragged on for decades. There was no consistent breaking point. Humans sometimes fought to complete annihilation. Other times they surrendered strategically and then resumed fighting years later. "You cannot predict when humans will stop fighting," Jiwan explained, "because we do not follow logical patterns. We fight for ideas, for symbols, for pride. We fight lost causes. We continue wars that make no strategic sense." She zoomed in on specific examples. This is the Korean War, on Earth. It lasted 3 years, and ended in a stalemate that persists to this day, centuries later. Neither side won. Both sides lost millions. And both sides consider it a strategic success. This is the Vietnam War. A technologically superior power fought a guerrilla resistance for 2 decades. The resistance lost every major battle. They lost 10 soldiers for every one of the enemy. And they won the war through sheer refusal to surrender. Admiral Thexis stood again. Ancient history. Your ancestors may have been stubborn, but you are a modern spacefaring civilization now. You will be rational. Ji-wan smiled sadly. Admiral, we are the descendants of those stubborn ancestors. Their blood runs in our veins. Their lessons are taught in our schools. Every human child learns about the wars where we refuse to quit. It is part of our identity. She changed the display again. Let me show you something more recent. This is New Havana. Your forces destroyed our defense fleet completely. 12 ships against 200. A logical species would have surrendered immediately. The battle footage played. Vorath ships tearing through human defenses. Human vessels exploding one after another. But watch carefully, Ji-wan said. See how they fight. Every ship fights until it is physically destroyed. Captains with disabled weapons ram your vessels. Crews that could escape instead stay at their posts. She paused the footage on an image of Hyan Wu's destroyer moments before it struck the Vorath carrier. This is Commander Hyan Wu. His last transmission was, "Tell them we were here." He knew he would die. He knew it would not change the outcome of the battle. And he attacked anyway. The Senate was quiet again. They had celebrated the victory at New Havana, but they had not fully understood what the battle meant. Your forces won, Ji-wan said, but you lost 17 ships doing it, against 12 human vessels. That is a casualty ratio that should concern you. She pulled up Yunji's analysis. My colleague has studied your previous conquests. On average, you win battles at casualty ratios of 30 to 1, sometimes 50 to 1. At New Havana, it was approximately 12 to 1. And that was against our weakest defense fleet, the one protecting a minor colony. Imagine, Ji-wan said softly, what happens when you attack Earth, when you face our main fleets, when you fight humans defending their homeworld, their families, everything they love. Admiral Thexis was growing angry. You speak of ratios and numbers, but they do not change the fundamental truth. We have more ships, better weapons, superior technology. We will win. Yes, Ji-wan said. You will win. But at what cost? She displayed new projections. Based on the New Havana data and human psychological profiles, my team has calculated probable outcomes of a full-scale war. We used your own military models, applied to human behavioral patterns. The numbers appeared in the air above the Senate. They were staggering. Estimated duration of conflict, 8 to 15 years. Estimated Vorath casualties, 40 to 60% of your total military force. Estimated human casualties, 95% or higher. Estimated cost to Vorath economy, equivalent to the resources needed to conquer 30 conventional species. The Senate erupted in noise. Senators argued, shouted, demanded to know how a primitive species could inflict such damage. Empress Valara silenced them with a gesture. These numbers are speculation. They are based on historical data, Ji-wan replied. Humans have fought wars of annihilation before. We know how. We just usually fight them against each other. She changed the display one more time. Let me show you the truly terrifying part. This is called Scorched Earth Doctrine. It is a human military strategy that dates back thousands of years. The images showed armies burning their own crops, destroying their own cities, poisoning their own wells. Anything to deny resources to the enemy. When humans face defeat, we destroy what we cannot defend. We do not leave useful infrastructure for the conqueror. We make every victory hollow. Earth has a saying, "If I cannot have it, no one can." Ji-Wan met the Empress's gaze directly. "Your Majesty, if you invade Earth, we will activate protocols that will turn our homeworld into a fortress. We will evacuate civilians to hidden colonies. We will booby-trap every city. We will make you pay for every building with blood. And if you succeed," she continued, "if you somehow manage to conquer Earth completely, you will find that humanity is no longer concentrated there. We have already spread across 100 worlds. You will have to hunt us through the entire galaxy." Admiral Thexus slammed his fist down. "Enough of these threats. You cannot frighten the Empire with talk of sacrifice. We have conquered 17 species. We know how to wage war." Ji-Wan turned to face him directly. "No, Admiral. You know how to wage conquest. You fight rational enemies who surrender when the math says they should. You have never fought a species that treats math as a suggestion." She pulled up one final piece of data. "Let me tell you about the Second World War on Earth. One nation, surrounded by enemies, fighting a war it could not win. It knew defeat was certain, and it fought for 4 more years. It mobilized children and elderly into combat. It fought in the streets of its capital while the city burned around it. When finally defeated, over 80% of its military-age population was dead or wounded. That," Ji-Wan said quietly, "is what humanity is capable of. And that was one nation, fighting alone. Imagine what we will do as a unified species." The chamber was silent. The Vorath senators were beginning to understand something they had not anticipated. They had not started a war against a weak species. They had started a war against something that did not know how to quit. Empress Valara spoke finally. "You paint a grim picture, but you still have not answered the central question. Why should the Empire negotiate with you? Even if your projections are correct, we will still win." Ji-Wan nodded. "You will win, Your Majesty, but the Empire will be weakened. Your fleets will be depleted. Your economy will be strained. And while you spend a decade destroying humanity, what will your rival powers do? What will the other empires in the galaxy do when they see the Vorath Empire exhausted from a war against a primitive species?" That landed hard. The Vorath Empire was powerful, but it was not alone in the galaxy. There were other powers, other threats. A weakened empire would be vulnerable. "You offer us a choice," the Empress said. "Fight a costly war we will win, or negotiate peace with a species we have already defeated." "I offer you wisdom, Your Majesty," Ji-Wan said. "The wisdom to recognize that some victories cost more than they are worth. The wisdom to see that humanity could be an ally rather than a conquest. The wisdom to understand that we are more valuable to you alive than dead." Empress Valara sat back on her throne. "We will consider what you have said. The Senate will deliberate. You are dismissed." Ji-Wan bowed and left the chamber with her team. As they walked through the corridors back to their quarters, Minho spoke quietly. "Do you think it worked?" "I do not know," Ji-Wan admitted. "But we showed them the truth. What they do with it is up to them." In the Senate chamber, the debate raged for hours. Some senators wanted to crush humanity immediately, to prove the Empire could not be intimidated. Others saw wisdom in Ji-Wan's words. The cost of conquering humanity might indeed be too high, and in the intelligence section of the Vorath Military Command, Officer Krell was compiling a new report. Everything the human diplomat had said matched his own analysis. Humanity was not a normal species. They were dangerous precisely because they did not follow normal patterns. The mystery that had begun at New Havana was deepening. The Vorath Empire had expected to fight a weak enemy. Instead, They had discovered something that terrified them more than any weapon. An enemy that welcomed death rather than surrender. Krell sat in his small office deep within the Voroth military complex, surrounded by screens displaying data that made him increasingly uneasy. He had been analyzing human combat patterns since New Havana, and everything he discovered contradicted conventional wisdom about warfare. He pulled up the sensor logs from the battle again. Human ships had fought with a coordination that suggested long practice against superior forces. Their formations maximized damage while minimizing exposure. Their retreat patterns were designed not to escape, but to draw enemies into traps. These were not the tactics of a peaceful species, caught unprepared. These were tactics that had been refined over centuries of constant warfare. Krell dug deeper into human communications that had been intercepted. Even their civilian transmissions revealed something disturbing. Humans discussed war casually, as if it were a normal part of existence. Their entertainment was filled with stories of battles and conflicts. Their children played war games. Their entire culture seemed oriented around combat. Preparation. He began compiling a comprehensive report for the War Council. As he worked, a priority message arrived from Earth surveillance teams. The humans were activating something called Protocol Ember. Krell accessed the intercepted data with growing alarm. Protocol Ember was humanity's total war mobilization plan. Within days of New Havana's fall, every human world had begun converting civilian infrastructure to military production. Factories that made farming equipment now produced weapons. Shipyards that built cargo vessels were being retooled for warships. Civilian populations were receiving combat training, but the most disturbing part was the timeline. The humans had implemented this protocol too quickly, too smoothly. This was not improvised. This was practiced. Humanity had been preparing for total war long before the Voroth arrived. Krell requested an emergency meeting with the War Council. Admiral Thexis initially dismissed it, still angry from the Senate session with the human diplomat. But when Krell shared his preliminary findings, the Admiral's attitude changed. The War Council gathered in a secure chamber. Admiral Thexis presided, along with 3 other senior military commanders and Empress Valara herself. "Present your analysis," the Empress commanded. Krell activated a holographic display. "Your Majesty, Council members, I have been studying human military doctrine since the New Havana engagement. What I have discovered suggests that our fundamental assumptions about humanity are wrong." He showed them the combat data. "Look at how human ships maneuver. This is not random. This is a specific tactical doctrine designed for fighting superior forces. They maximize damage per engagement while preserving their ability to escape and regroup. This is guerrilla warfare adapted for space combat. All species try to preserve their forces," one council member said. "Not like this," Krell replied. "Most species preserve forces to fight again when they have an advantage. Humans preserve forces specifically to continue fighting when they have no advantage. Their entire doctrine assumes permanent inferiority." He changed the display. "Now look at their ship construction. Human vessels are modular. They can be repaired in field conditions using parts from damaged ships. They prioritize redundancy over efficiency. These are ships designed for a long war where resupply will be difficult." Admiral Thexis frowned. "They are simply poor engineers." "No, Admiral," Krell said. "They are engineers who expect to lose 90% of their fleet and need the remaining 10% to keep fighting. This is intentional design philosophy." He pulled up data on human colonization patterns. "Look at how they spread across space. They do not concentrate populations efficiently. Instead, they scatter across hundreds of small colonies, often in difficult locations." "Why?" The council members exchanged glances. "It was inefficient by Voroth standards." "Because," Krell explained, Scattered populations cannot be destroyed in a single campaign. To eliminate humanity, an enemy would need to hunt them across the entire galaxy. This is a species that expects to be attacked and has prepared accordingly. Empress Velara leaned forward. You are saying they anticipated war before we ever contacted them? Not specifically with us, Your Majesty, but with someone. Humanity behaves like prey that knows predators exist. They are constantly preparing for the worst. Krell showed them Protocol Ember. This is their total war mobilization plan. Within 1 week of New Havana, they had converted 20% of their industrial capacity to military production. By the end of the month, they project 60% conversion. These are numbers that should take years, not weeks. How is that possible? A council member asked. Because they practiced, Krell said. Multiple times. Humanity runs war mobilization drills the way other species run fire drills. They are ready because they have made themselves ready. The council chamber was silent as the implications sank in. Meanwhile, on Earth, scientist Suho was making a discovery that would prove even more significant. He worked in a genomics laboratory in Seoul, studying human evolution. The war with the Vorth had prompted renewed interest in what made humans different from other species. Suho had been analyzing ancient human DNA, comparing it with modern samples. What he found made him call an emergency meeting with the United Terran Council's science advisor. Look at this genetic bottleneck, Suho explained, displaying complex DNA sequences. Approximately 70,000 years ago, the human population crashed. We think it dropped to maybe 10,000 individuals total. Our entire species nearly went extinct. What caused it? The advisor asked. We are not certain. Climate change, volcanic eruption, disease. But here is the important part. Most species that experience such a bottleneck never recover. The genetic diversity is too low. They slowly decline into extinction. But we didn't, the advisor said. No, we exploded. Within 10,000 years, humans had spread across the entire planet. We adapted to every climate, from Arctic tundra to tropical jungles. We outlasted megafauna that were stronger and faster. We survived ice ages and droughts and plagues. Genetically, humans should have gone extinct dozens of times. But we kept surviving. Suho pulled up more data, and every time we faced extinction, we adapted. We developed new tools, new strategies, new social structures. Humans are not the strongest species Earth produced. We are the most stubborn. The science advisor understood immediately. This needs to go to the diplomatic team. The Vorith think we are just another species. They need to understand what we actually are. On Varathis Prime, Ji-Wan received the encrypted data from Earth. She read Suho's findings 3 times, each time feeling a chill run down her spine. Humanity was not just culturally adapted to survive. They were genetically selected for it over thousands of generations. She requested a private audience with Empress Velara. To her surprise, the Empress agreed immediately. They met in a private garden, away from the formal chambers. It was the first time Ji-Wan had seen the Empress without the full weight of imperial ceremony. You have more to tell me, the Empress said. It was not a question. I have received new information from Earth, Ji-Wan said. Scientific data that explains something I could not articulate in the Senate. She showed the Empress Suho's genetic research. 70,000 years ago, my species nearly died. We were reduced to a few thousand individuals scattered across one continent. Any rational projection said we would go extinct within a few generations. But you survived, Velara said. We thrived, Ji-Wan corrected. We spread across our entire world. We became the dominant species on a planet where we were not the strongest, fastest, or most numerous. We did it through adaptability and refusal to accept extinction. The Empress studied the data. This is remarkable. But what does ancient history matter now? Because, Your Majesty, those same survival instincts are encoded in every human alive today. When the Vorath attacked New Havana, you did not just attack a colony. You triggered genetic memory that goes back thousands of generations. You reminded humanity that we can die. And our response to that threat is not surrender. It is survival at any cost. Ji-Wan pulled up comparative data. Every species you have conquered came from worlds where they were dominant. They evolved in relative safety. When faced with extinction, they had no reference for how to respond. They surrendered because they had never learned that survival requires sacrifice. But humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill us constantly. Ice ages, predators, disease, famine, we survived them all. Not through strength, but through stubbornness. Through willingness to endure anything, sacrifice anything, lose anything except our existence. The Empress was quiet for a long moment. You are telling me that war is not an aberration for your species. It is your natural state. Not our natural state, Ji-Wan said carefully, but our historical state. Humans have been fighting for survival for so long that we do not know how to stop. Even when we fight each other, we are really practicing to fight the next existential threat. She met the Empress's eyes. Your Majesty, you did not start a war with a weak species. You started a war with a species that has spent 70,000 years refusing to die. We will lose against the Vorath Empire, but we will make you regret every day of that war. Empress Velara turned away, looking out over the garden. The Senate wants to crush you. They see your defiance as insult. I understand, Ji-Wan said. But I see something else, the Empress continued. I see a species that could be valuable. Not as subjects, but as something else. She turned back to Ji-Wan. There is something you need to know. Something the Empire has kept secret for 1,000 years. The Empress pulled up ancient Vorath records, data that predated their current empire. Long ago, before the Vorath spread across the stars, we faced extinction. There was a machine intelligence, something we call the Devourers. They consumed civilizations, turning entire worlds into resources for their expansion. Ji-Wan listened intently as the Empress described a war that nearly destroyed the Vorath species. We survived by hiding, by becoming strong enough that the Devourers passed us by. We thought they were gone, destroyed or dormant somewhere in deep space. But our deep space sensors have detected something in recent years. Signals consistent with Devourer technology. They are reactivating. The revelation hit Ji-Wan like a physical blow. You think they are coming back. I think they never left, the Empress said. They have been dormant, rebuilding. And when they return, they will be stronger than before. Why tell me this? Ji-Wan asked. Because, the Empress said, the Vorath Empire knows how to fight species like ourselves. We know how to conquer through strength and strategy. But the Devourers cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be intimidated. They must be fought with absolute commitment until they are destroyed. The Empress looked directly at Ji-Wan. The Empire has never fought an enemy that requires total war. But humanity has fought nothing else for its entire existence. You are adapted for exactly the kind of war we fear most. Ji-Wan understood. You want an alliance. I want to avoid mutual destruction, the Empress said. Your diplomat's presentation terrified the Senate because it was true. Fighting humanity will weaken the Empire at exactly the moment we may face our greatest threat. So you would trade one war for another, Ji-Wan said. No, the Empress replied. I would trade conquest for alliance. The Vorath need allies who will not quit when the math says they should. You need allies with the technology and resources to survive. Together, we might be prepared for what is coming. Ji-Wan thought about Earth, about the millions of humans preparing for a war of extinction. She thought about Protocol Ember, and all the terrible plans humanity had activated. She thought about Commander Hyan Wu and all the people who had died at New Havana. "I will need to consult with my government," she said. "Of course," the Empress said, "but do not take too long. The mystery we both need to solve is not why humans fight like cornered animals. It is whether we can learn to fight together before something worse than either of us arrives." The United Terran Council received Jiwan's encrypted report in stunned silence. The President read it 3 times before calling an emergency session. Every representative from every human world gathered in the council chambers on Earth, their faces grave. "The Vorath Empress is offering a ceasefire," the President said. "But the price is an alliance against this threat she calls the Devourers." Arguments erupted immediately. Some representatives demanded the Vorath pay reparations for New Havana. Others wanted guarantees that humanity would maintain sovereignty. A few advocated rejecting the offer entirely and continuing preparations for total war. Councillor Seogjin from Mars stood. "We should not trust them. They attacked us. They killed thousands of our people. Now they want our help? They are afraid," said Councillor Yuna from the Jupiter colonies. The Empress revealed a secret that could weaken her entire empire. She must truly believe this threat is real. The debate continued for hours. Meanwhile, on Verathis Prime, a similar debate raged in the Imperial Senate. Admiral Fexus led the faction demanding humanity's complete subjugation. "We do not need allies," he argued. "We need subjects. The Empire has faced threats before without help from primitives." But Officer Krell presented his complete analysis to the Senate. The numbers were undeniable. A war with humanity would cost the Empire 40 to 60% of its military strength over a decade. The Vorath would win, but they would be catastrophically weakened. "If the Devourers return while we are fighting humans," Krell explained, "the Empire will not survive. We cannot fight 2 wars of extinction simultaneously." Empress Velara listened to both sides. Finally, she made her decision. The Empire will offer humanity a treaty. We will withdraw from New Havana and all human space. We will recognize human sovereignty. In exchange, humanity will ally with us against external threats. "Your Majesty," Admiral Fexus protested, "this sets a terrible precedent. We are negotiating from strength. Why offer terms?" "Because," the Empress said coldly, "strength means knowing when to stop fighting. The human diplomat taught us that lesson. Some victories cost more than they are worth." Back on Earth, a Terran Council took a vote. It was not unanimous, but the majority agreed. Humanity would accept the alliance with conditions. The Vorath would withdraw completely. Human sovereignty would be absolute. And both species would maintain separate militaries, cooperating only against common threats. Jiwan transmitted Earth's response to the Empress. Within a day, a formal ceremony was arranged. The Armistice of Verathis Prime would be signed in the Imperial Senate chamber, broadcast across both civilizations. The ceremony was elaborate. Vorath tradition demanded formal recognition of peace with full honors. Empress Velara wore ceremonial armor that dated back to the founding of the Empire. Jiwan represented humanity in a simple diplomatic uniform, refusing to dress in anything more elaborate. The treaty was read aloud in both languages. The Vorath would evacuate New Havana within 1 standard month. All human prisoners would be returned. The Empire would pay compensation for damages, though the amount was token compared to the actual losses. In exchange, humanity pledged to respond if the Vorath faced existential threats. A joint defense council would be established. Intelligence would be shared. Both species would maintain the peace. When the moment came to sign, Jiwan hesitated. She thought about Commander Hyan Wu and everyone who died at New Havana. She thought about the months of preparation for total war that would now be unwound. She thought about all the terrible weapons that had been dusted off and could now be mothballed again. Then she signed. Empress Valara signed beside her. The treaty was sealed. The war that could have destroyed both civilizations ended before it truly began. But Ji-Wan knew this was not really peace. It was a postponement. The real test would come when the Devourers returned. After the ceremony, a smaller group met in private. Empress Valara, Ji-Wan, Admiral Thexus, Officer Krell, and several military planners from both sides. They discussed the reality behind the treaty. "We need to see the evidence of these Devourers," Ji-Wan said bluntly. "Earth's military will not commit resources based on ancient history alone." Krell presented the deep space sensor data. Signals detected in distant systems that matched Vorath records of Devourer activity. Entire star systems going dark. Energy signatures consistent with massive construction projects. "How long do we have?" Ji-Wan asked. "Unknown," Krell admitted. "Months, years, maybe decades. But the Devourers are methodical. When they move, they will sweep across the galaxy systematically." Admiral Thexus spoke grudgingly. "The Vorath military will share our technological database with humanity. You will need better weapons than you currently possess. And you will need our tactical doctrines," Ji-Wan replied. "The Vorath fight to conquer. But the Devourers cannot be conquered. They must be destroyed completely. Humanity has experience with that kind of warfare." Over the following weeks, a strange transformation occurred. Vorath technology specialists arrived on Earth, sharing weapon designs and shield systems that were centuries ahead of human engineering. Human military planners traveled to Varathus Prime, teaching guerrilla tactics and asymmetric warfare to Vorath officers who had never considered such methods. The cultural exchange was awkward. Vorath found human casualness disturbing. Humans found Vorath formality stifling. But slowly, understanding grew. A joint facility was established on a neutral station between human and Vorath space. The first combined military exercise was scheduled. Both sides approached it warily. Ji-Wan was assigned as the senior human liaison to the Joint Defense Council. She worked alongside a Vorath officer named Hai-Jin, who had been part of the invasion fleet at New Havana. "I killed your people," Hai-Jin said during their first private conversation. "How can you work with me?" Ji-Wan was silent for a moment. "Because the alternative is that we kill each other until one of us is gone. My people died to show yours that we would not submit. Your people withdrew to show us that you could learn. Now we honor them both by surviving." Hai-Jin nodded slowly. "The Empress chose well when she negotiated with you. You understand what must be done." "I understand necessity," Ji-Wan corrected. "Not friendship. We are allies because we must be. Whether we become more than that depends on what comes next." Minho was appointed as humanity's first military attaché to the Vorath Empire. He traveled to Varathus Prime to coordinate with their war council. The Vorath were fascinated by human combat psychology and disturbed by it in equal measure. "You teach your children about wars you lost?" A Vorath general asked Minho during a briefing. "We teach them about wars that should have been lost, but were won through refusal to quit," Minho explained. "We teach them that survival sometimes requires impossible sacrifice. We teach them that defeat is only final when you accept it." The general absorbed this. The Empire teaches that defeat must be avoided at all costs. We fight to win, or we do not fight. That works when you are stronger, Minho said. But humanity has spent most of its history being weaker. We learned different lessons. The joint training exercises revealed both strengths and weaknesses. Vorath forces were disciplined and technologically superior. But when faced with unpredictable scenarios, they struggled. Human forces were chaotic and improvised constantly. But they adapted to changing situations faster. Admiral Thexus watched the exercises with growing respect. "Your forces lack proper discipline," he told the human commander. "Your forces lack proper creativity." The commander replied, By the end of the first exercise, both sides had learned from each other. Voref units began incorporating flexible tactics. Human units began adopting better coordination. It was imperfect, but it was progress. 6 months after the armistice, the Joint Defense Council held its first full meeting. Representatives from both civilizations gathered to discuss strategy against the Devourer threat. Empress Valara opened the session. "We are here because we chose cooperation over conquest. But let us be honest about what we are. We are not friends. We are not allies by choice. We are survivors who recognize that together we have a better chance than apart." Ji-Wan stood to respond. "Your Majesty speaks truth. Humanity did not want this alliance. We would have preferred to be left alone. But the Vorith taught us that isolation is not safety. And now we prepare together for something worse." Officer Krell presented updated intelligence on the Devourers. The signals were stronger now, more frequent. Whatever was out there in deep space was becoming more active. "We estimate first contact within 5 to 7 years, Krell said. "Based on historical patterns, they will send scout forces first. Then, if they determine our civilizations are vulnerable, they will commit to full assault. Then we have 5 years to prepare," Ji-Wan said. 5 years to turn 2 suspicious allies into an effective fighting force. The Council approved a massive joint military buildup. Shipyards across both civilizations began construction of new vessels, incorporating both Vorith technology and human design philosophy. Research centers shared data on weapons development. Training programs integrated forces from both species. It was expensive. It was difficult. But both sides understood the stakes. 3 years later, Ji-Wan stood on an observation deck of the Joint Defense Station, watching combined fleets conduct exercises. Vorith cruisers flew in formation with human destroyers. Mixed crews trained together, learning each other's languages and methods. Haijin joined her at the window. The Vorith officer had become something like a friend over the years of working together. "Do you think it will be enough?" Haijin asked. "When the Devourers come, will we be ready?" "I do not know," Ji-Wan admitted. "But I know we have a better chance than we did. The Vorith have strength and technology. Humanity has stubbornness and adaptability. Together, we might survive." "The Empress was right to fear your species," Haijin said quietly. "But she was also right to ally with you. The Devourers cannot be defeated by strength alone. They must be fought by those who refuse to accept defeat." Ji-Wan smiled slightly. "That is the real mystery, is it not?" The Vorith thought they ignited a war with a weak species. Instead, they discovered a species that has been at war with extinction for 70,000 years. And now, instead of fighting each other, we fight together. "Your commander, Haiyan Wu," Haijin said. "The one who died at New Havana. His last words were, 'Tell them we were here.' What did he mean?" Ji-Wan looked out at the combined fleets. "He meant that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. That even if we lost, we would make sure the universe remembered we existed. That we fought. The Empire will remember," Haijin said. "We ignited a war and discovered something that terrified us. But fear taught us wisdom. And wisdom brought us here." In the distance, a new ship was being launched. It was a collaborative design, incorporating the best of both civilizations. On its hull was painted a symbol that represented both the Vorith Empire and the United Terran Council. The ship's name was visible as it turned, the Haiyan Wu, a memorial to the battle that started a war and ended with an alliance. Ji-Wan felt tears on her face. Commander Haiyan Wu had died to show the Vorith as humanity would not surrender. In doing so, he had inadvertently saved both civilizations. The Vorath learned that some enemies were too costly to defeat. Humanity learned that some wars could be ended without surrender. And now, together, they prepared for a war that would test everything both species had learned. The Devourers were coming. But they would not find easy prey. They would find two civilizations that understood survival. One that had conquered through strength. One that had survived through stubbornness. United not by friendship, but by the recognition that some threats required impossible alliances. The mystery that had terrified the Vorath Empire was solved. Humanity was dangerous because they treated survival as non-negotiable. But that same quality made them the perfect allies against an enemy that could not be negotiated with Dot as the Haiyan Wu completed its maiden voyage. Both human and Vorath crew members worked side by side. They did not love each other. They did not fully trust each other, but they understood each other. And in the darkness of space, where ancient machines stirred and prepared to devour civilizations, two species stood ready. Not as conquerors, not as subjects, but as allies who had learned the terrible price of understanding Dot. The war the Vorath ignited had ended, but the war that would define both species was about to begin. And this time, they would fight together.